Some people are going to be sitting at their Thanksgiving table in a few days, and they're going to feel really thankful for the people sitting around them, and at the same time, there's somebody that's not there.
That you can be laughing and sobbing at the same time, that you can feel immensely grateful for being where you are and with whom you are in that moment, and be very sad about the loss of that.
This grief event has been really different because every time I felt it in my body, I made sure to do something tangibly.
But she's like, I'm not doing it for her, I'm doing it for me. I'm doing what makes sense for me and takes care of me for my grief and my memory around this. I think.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Take. We're going to talk about gratitude versus greed. It's a real holiday struggle. Grief. I apologize. Gratitude versus grief. I said greed, didn't I?
You did.
It's a real holiday. Or nix that. Do that again.
Yeah.
Even though it's live.
Take two.
We're going to talk about gratitude versus grief. It is a real holiday struggle. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Carrie.
Hey, Josh.
I botched that intro.
Nothing like coming in and having to correct you.
I know,
I'm like,
you put in all this work.
I know.
I cleaned out the room, studio.
You did. You
A whole
arranged everything.
I know. A whole new setup, and then the very first thing screwed it up.
Well,
Damn it.
it's
Okay.
okay. The quality of the work will matter more
know.
than. But greed and
Anyway.
grief are pretty distinctly different concepts. So I thought I can't really just
Yeah.
let that one, you
But
know.
I feel like greed could lead to grief, probably.
Should, perhaps, would be a
Should.
nice natural
We
consequence.
We haven't experienced that yet. Other than being disappointed, unless that's grief.
At least that's familiar. Yeah. Okay.
Well, we have a really special episode. Two of our oldest clinical friends. I don't know how we
Oh,
would.
that
How you
sounds.
would,
I know.
what would you say?
Other therapy geeks? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, have joined us
Okay.
today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so Whitney and Shannon, thank you guys for being here.
Good
Super glad to
afternoon,
have
you
you.
guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
Whitney, welcome back. By the way, it's
I
your third
know.
time. You're regular. Your episodes are the most popular ones. I've told you that before. And
I have a lot of family.
Those
many moms do you
Arkansans
have?
really come out.
There's like 50 cousins.
Well, we appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to do just a more formal introduction to you guys today. So first we have Dr. Shannon Dial, which is fun to say, given that we grew up together in a graduate program.
It's like I'm a real
Yeah.
grown-up.
I know. And you're a licensed marital family therapist, and we could go through a long resume that you have, but the important piece I really want to highlight is we have you here now.
Yay!
We're so excited to be working alongside you. It's been, how many years since we've been in grad school? 20?
Almost 20.
Yeah, that's crazy. But
Yeah. I'm so glad to be practicing here with you guys.
yeah, we're so happy to have you. Then Whitney, you're come down from Stillwater. For people who aren't familiar, she's the owner of the Whitney Alexander group in Stillwater. But also, anybody who's watched our previous episodes, they're gonna know you for the complex PTSD talk that we had, as well as self-awareness stuff, which was really popular. So I'd encourage people to go back and watch those episodes. They're really good, and also I think fun discussions, which is why we like having you here. Something people may not know is we all of us went to grad school together. So this is
It's like a reunion.
yeah, a little reunion.
Yeah.
Clinical graduate programs might be a little different than some other people's experience in graduate programs, so we get really close and traumatized,
Trauma bonded,
all in
yes.
the same ways. For anybody listening to this is or watching this is a 2-part episode, since we have both of them together, which may or may not be a rarity. We'll see. My plan is, if I am able to budget my time wisely, I guess, is to release on the podcast platforms the first part of this on Monday, and then on Thanksgiving do the second part of it. Part 1, which is what we're going to talk about for the first half, we're going to talk about gratitude versus grief, and I'm going to do a real quick episode breakdown so everybody knows the points that we're going to cover. We're going to start out just by talking about the coexistence of emotions in general, that two things can exist at the same time. And then the battle of cultural expectations versus your own personal experiences, and then just the impact of our personal experiences and how those affect our different emotional states. But before we dive into it, I just want to remind everybody who is watching this on YouTube to please subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the alert buttons, like the video. If you're watching it more than 3 minutes, you should like it. I think that should be a rule. YouTube should just automatically make the like button click when that happens. If you're listening to this on the podcast platforms, please just stop what you're doing for a quick second and just go give us a 5-star review. Write something nice if you want to. Then make sure you're checking your show notes, because I try to put a lot of links that are related to what we're talking about to just give you more resources as you move through your own mental health or relational journeys. Well, I thought, as we began, I thought it'd be fun to play a would you rather game. You guys want to do that real quickly?
Yes.
Icebreaker. I love it.
All right, so regarding eating a Thanksgiving meal, would you rather have no utensils or no napkins?
I'm going to go with no napkins.
Most definitely no utensils.
No napkins.
I'm going with no napkins. Although that was a hard one for me, I will have to admit, because no utensils just sounds fun.
That's why.
Is that why you picked it?
That's why I don't let things like that get in the way of a good meal.
Yeah.
So, Whitney, are you eating with your hands,
Yes.
or are you just going face down into your
Both.
plate?
Yeah.
Depending, at the end, you're going to have to tilt the plate up
Oh.
and finish it off.
She already has a strategy.
The Randy
Well,
scene in Christmas Story.
The problem is I did this a little too late in my life. I didn't realize that I was going to have to learn how to use a fork properly and eat correctly before I started dating. And I didn't
no.
time the two of those very well.
Wait, did
so
you
when
fist
I
grip
first
the fork?
fist gripped the fork at 16,
Oh,
going
man.
on dates with people. And then
You're
I
like
didn't
a savage.
remember. Right. Because
Yeah.
there's 6 kids in my family. You got to just
do you
get the
write?
food.
Six
Did you write
kids.
like this too with your hand?
No, I
like with a
didn't.
pencil?
But
You had
then
to
I
shovel it
remember
in.
There was a point where I tilted the plate up at the end, and I saw the look of horror on whoever I was dating. I was like, oops.
Are you supposed
I've
to
made a
drink the
big
liquid
mistake.
off your plate?
Yeah, I know.
Sometimes the gravy is really good.
Oh, that's funny. If my son was listening to this, he'd be like, "Wait, we have utensils?"
Utensils?
It's
Yeah.
like I always, my fingers are my utensils. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, next one. On Thanksgiving, would you rather have accidentally burnt the turkey or have forgotten to make desserts?
I'm going to go with forgotten desserts because I just believe everybody counts on turkey in Thanksgiving.
I agree with you. Turkey for sure.
No, I'm
Yeah.
going to go desserts are more important because I like to make desserts. I've only made one turkey, and it was very stressful. And so I was really hoping people had low expectations for the turkey, but I have no lack of confidence in my dessert making ability. So I would be very sad if there was no pumpkin cheesecake or
Yeah.
apple
Sounds
pie.
delicious.
I would also go with desserts. All right. So
Yeah.
the final one here. Would you have after Thanksgiving? Rather have dinner that is stuffing only for a month or never eat stuffing again?
Never eat stuffing again. For sure.
I don't even like stuffing.
Really, I love stuffing. I'd have to force myself for a month so that I wouldn't be banned from it for my lifetime.
Then you'd hate it.
I know, but at least it'd be a choice.
For the first time when it comes to this issue, I feel extremely validated. I do not like stuffing.
Oh,
and there are
cornbread stuffing,
three
any
people in this
kind?
room. Huh? I cannot. I do not
You love
get
bread.
it.
This
I
is
don't get it
crazy
either.
to me.
Whoa.
I feel like
don't
it must
get
be
it.
hard to make because I feel like a lot of people fail or they use like a quick bag.
Yeah.
It does-
Turkey, the stuffing, the cranberry, all in one
get it.
bite.
Gross.
Heaven.
That's nasty.
Maybe I haven't
No, I
mixed
want
the
the
right
stuffing.
combination of.
No, Josh, listen, I've tried it. I gaslit myself for many years that I must be wrong about stuffing, and
You're
I
the
just learned
problem,
that
Taylor
I
Swift.
just don't
Yeah.
like stuffing.
All right. Well, let's talk about this. Kind of moving into the first topic, it's just coexistence of emotions. I feel like that we live in a culture where everything's always split into two. It's like it's either this or it's that, and I just think sometimes we like to simplify it in our head because it's less complex then. You can be happy during Thanksgiving or you can be sad, but can you actually be both?
I think the most complex thing really is that we can say they can coexist, but I don't know that people know how to actually do that. And it feels that maybe if they're in a time of grief and they show gratitude or joy in the holidays, that it's some sort of insult to the grief or to maybe somebody that they've lost or something. And so I think there's almost maybe some guilt and shame about trying to focus on the positive or be grateful whenever you may be grieving something like a loss that is really hard. And so I think people think, well, I have to grieve, or otherwise people are going to think I don't care about the loss. And so if I show gratitude and happiness and joy in the holidays, they're going to think I'm doing fine, and I'm really not.
Yeah. So, and I do think you're kind of touching on a little bit on some of the cultural expectations, what we're going to talk about in just a second. But because I think some people are just really sad, they're not feeling a lot of gratitude at all, but there is that cultural expectation, and that's a battle. But I think some people, they do feel the tug-of-war. Like, some people are going to be sitting at their Thanksgiving table in a few days, and they're going to feel really thankful for the people sitting around them, and at the same time, there's somebody that's not there, for example. And they're going to feel grief, and then they just, what do you do with that, And so it's a real thing. And it probably has hit us all at some point or another, I would imagine. If you've lived more than 3 decades on the planet, then you've probably experienced that.
Yeah. I think, though, that whenever you talk with clients about this ability to hold two opposing truths at the same time, that maybe they haven't had the space to actually be aware of it, but it does have, if you start getting in touch with your body, there's an intuition around that, right? It makes me think of that line from Still Magnolias, laughter through tears is my favorite emotion, or something like that. I'm sure I'm getting it wrong, as we already have done on a previous episode about our memory of quotes from movies is always wrong. But the idea that you can be laughing and sobbing at the same time, that you can feel immensely grateful for being where you are and with whom you are in that moment, and be very sad about the loss or the absence, maybe not just of a person, but because an event has changed you or the system. But I think that when you start to do that there's a settling that happens in people. And I notice when we have it in therapy, people, I think I can notice that, right? And so I just think that the reason we're talking about it is not because it's a fascinatingly foreign concept. I think it's something we're built in to be able to do.
It's almost like people need permission.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it goes with, I think, what Josh was saying at the beginning of this, which is I think we understand intuitively that more than one emotion exists at the same time, but I don't know that we're always given the skills to talk about the complexity of that, right? So when you think about an emotions check-in or a check-in, how have you been? There's potentially loads and loads of competing, what feel like opposing emotions that can happen. And the truth is they all exist inside a person. And I think for simplicity's sake, sometimes we feel like, oh my goodness, well, I need to pick the one that is the most palatable. I need to pick the one that feels the biggest. And how do we triage which emotion we talk about? And I think we're talking about here, I don't know that you really even have to do that.
Right. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but when you were talking, I was thinking of the movie Inside Out. That's a really good example of how the emotions themselves, almost like, as I said earlier, experience a tug-of-war match. It feels like these parts, and I like the use of parts language here, battle each other. And then the challenge, though, as is portrayed in that movie, is for them, the parts themselves, to realize they can work together. And I do think that is the ultimate challenge for us when you're feeling that tug of war. It's instead of taking an approach of one of them has to win out, which we saw as we seen in Inside Out. It usually ends in some kind of disaster, right? It just gets worse. So it's figuring out some way to lean into it where you're letting those emotions work together, and that's usually when it's the most healing and powerful, in my opinion.
They all need to have a voice.
Yeah.
They all get a turn. I always tell my clients that everybody gets to ride in the car. We don't get to put one of our parts in the duct tape it and stick it in the trunk. It doesn't make them very happy.
Boy,
doesn't
we
make
like to sometimes.
Yeah, we do like to. This isn't a very fun emotion.
I think that gratitude and grief also, they flip. a lot. Maybe for some people, we're talking about how they can live side by side, but to me, they're also on the same coin. So in times of grief, that when I've felt pain, I can focus on gratitude to give me a little bit of relief. But in other times, when I'm thinking about how grateful I am for what I have, it reminds me also of what I don't have.
That's so true.
Right.
And
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
so I don't know where that fits for our discussion, but I do feel them both and have felt them both a lot, but they each kind of lead to the other for me in various instances of where I'm at,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have the space to be able to experience both inside your body and outside of your body? So like inside, like, can I make space inside of me for both gratitude and grief, and I don't try to shame my experience? And then if I'm willing to say it out loud, sometimes I'm also in an environment that maybe I've made space for it and I'm cool with it, but somebody else is not cool with both of those things being
Yeah.
held, in reverence.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you guys about just grief early in my life versus later in my life. And early in my life, I was in that I need to prove to everybody I'm fine and I'm coping with it. And later in life, now in adulthood, I really, this past grief cycle for me, or this grief event, has been really different because every time I felt it in my body, I made sure to do something tangibly or like some sort of evidence on the outside that reflected what was on the inside. And I never pretended like it wasn't there. And so I've just been really, really conscientious of when I feel it, what it brings, what thoughts it's bringing, and then I create the space for it with better boundaries of saying, like, I'm not going to go and pretend that I'm not feeling it, things like that. And so, but also to me, the reason it's so good to pair these together is that I think as we get older and we lose something, you just become ever more grateful for what you do have because you realize how time limited our connections are.
Yes.
And so gratitude is just such a perfect word for grief because I feel like when you lose something, you can either spend time focusing on all you lost, or you can be grateful for all you had with that person and all you still have today with the people and connections you have with you. And so I've seen both in my clients where when somebody loses somebody, they're like, I'm never going to be close to anybody again. Whereas healthy grief to me pushes you towards people instead of away and makes you thrive and feel connected and supported in your grief because of what you still do have in connections, if that makes sense.
I see it as like not an either or, but a both and a recognition that if I can make space for both of those things, I probably will end up, releasing some of the wound of the loss, right? Like there are times where you just want to sit and be sad that I don't have this person, I don't have these things, and it may force you to want to isolate and not talk. And it's okay to do that, recognizing you may not have to stay in that point for forever and ever and ever. And there are other times where you are just overwhelmed with gratitude and you want to, think about what you have. And to me, I see it as, let's go back and forth. Let's not, say that one is better than the other, and recognize I think both truly exist. And it's the stopping of a part. It's the stopping of the emotion. It's the binary sense that we take that something is good or bad when it comes to grief that seems to stymie it the most. And it's more, what I'm hearing you describe is that you're just letting yourself do what feels right this time. And is it going better?
But the timing that happens doesn't always coordinate with the adult.
The external events.
Yeah. And so just, as a tip to people that I often talk about my clients, what are just some brief statements, I call it a little elevator speech, that you can tell somebody that reflects really where you're at, where you're honoring where you're at. If it's like, hey, I think I'm gonna have to sit out of this meeting today. I'm just in my grief today and just need a little space. Some things that you can tell family or in a work environment or something where you're honoring it and you're being vulnerable with appropriate, safe people. about where you're at today.
Yeah.
I
And
think
I would
rehearsing
love it
those-
if people would feel like they could do that around the holidays. I know I reached out to my mom before Thanksgiving, and I was like, do you want to host this year? You know, we just
'Cause she just lost someone.
we just buried our family matriarch, and you know, I know that's rough, and I was like, I am happy to host if you don't feel like it, and you know, she was like, no, I think I really do want to do this year.
But you acknowledged it. You
Absolutely,
acknowledged the
and we're going
difference.
to. As it was
Right.
literally the conversation on driving here to Oklahoma City today, just talking
So
about.
she's likely going to experience that phenomenon Shannon's talking about,
Oh,
where she's
yeah.
going to be sitting at the table, and I'm not saying you guys won't either, but I would imagine it'd be different for your mom, you know, and she's sitting at the table, and she's going to be so thankful about all of you guys, and probably in a way that's even greater than what she's felt before.
Sure.
And at the very same time, it's going to remind her what she doesn't have.
That's right. And they can coexist in the same moment, in the same body. And if we can tell ourselves it's okay to have both, and I don't have to tell myself, oh, I'm being dishonoring of somebody's memory if I'm only focusing on how joyful I am right now. And I also tell myself, I can also feel the grief because that's natural and logical based on where I'm at, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's the piece that lets it, like that's the healing for the wound.
Yeah.
That's gonna just take a little bit of time.
Well, I think that what the concept is, I think I really liked your image, Shannon, of it's the same coin. Because it creates a circular movement nature. And what we're really talking about there is regulation, right? And you think about an attachment system, right? Is all about being able to withstand some conflict, distress, and distance, and then reconnect, right? And this is an internal attachment system, right?
Right.
Because how we feel to the person or experiences that have changed us is how we come into it with our anger, grief, loss, and then how we can also shift our focus and feel a deeper sense of gratitude or self-awareness, right? And so the concept that you're talking about is the ability to regulate. We're not even just talking about self-regulation. We're talking about regulating with your systems, like when you called your mom. That's that whole system being able to regulate the shift that's happened. And I think that humans do their best, again, when there is this recognition that everything is a circular in and out, right, of back and forth between this gratitude and grief.
I had an intern yesterday or a couple days ago when we were talking. He said, I have a quote that really helped me. He goes, dysregulation is part of the regulation process. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Did your brain explode?
Right, it did. It
Yeah.
totally exploded. And I was like,
That's great.
because I think, again, sometimes we try to think about dysregulation bad, regulation
Right,
good,
good,
instead of going,
right.
no, they flow.
Right, like
right?
rupture
They
is part of
flow.
repair and
Yeah.
relapse is part of recovery, all those kind of, yeah.
Failure is part of success.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good segue too to kind of talk about the cultural expectations, because none of it's easy. You know, people can hear us talking about this, and and sometimes when especially when therapists are just talking back and forth, sometimes it sounds so easy, but it's not in any point in time. But I do think it's especially difficult in the holidays. I think most of us, for most people, anyways. And I think it has to do with the cultural expectations of the holidays. I try to every year, put something out into the media world, just reminding people that on Thanksgiving, for example, not everybody is thankful, and I did a YouTube video on this where, being thankful and gratuitous, are synonymous to each other for most people, like if I have gratitude, or I'm thankful, but I try to think of it as like, gratitude to me is more of a feeling that is all encompassing. Like it's panned out, it's looking at more than just what's happening right now, and I feel grateful for the things in my life and the people in my life and the experiences I've had, but being thankful often is like a momentary thing, like it's more, confined to the moment or closer to the moment, the situation. And some people are just, because things have happened, they're still grateful, but not exactly thankful in that moment, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. And it's these cultural expectations as we enter the holidays that really make it difficult, because they're not supposed to feel the other feelings.
And,
you know?
and to me, as I reflect on the years that I have had more struggles with feeling gratitude over the holidays, I think the way I look at it right now is like survival mode. Like gratitude is something that I think is an emotion that's not conjured up when I'm deep in the throes of my nervous system, like feeling like I can, barely put one foot in front of the other. It always reminds me of, again, back to the movie quote thing, like, I think it was the Hunger Games, like, after the two people that won the Hunger Games, like, they're on the train going home and there's like all this food and all this great stuff, and they're just like, I doubt they were feeling terribly grateful that they survived at that moment,
Right.
that there was a bunch of food, that lots of great things were getting ready to happen to them. And like, again, it's this binary conceptualization that we have that there's something wrong with somebody just being in survival mode over the holidays. And what if that is your reality? Like, can we make space for survival mode being holiday vibes too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by survival mode, you mean being in the feeling? Or
Yeah.
because to me, survival mode is what's happening.
No, or like
know what
for
I
me,
mean?
it's always been about like I put my head down. I just try to put one foot in front of the other. I'm gonna get through this today, and for me, there's not a ton of space for feelings. Whereas somebody else might be so overwhelmed with feelings that that's what puts them in
I see what you
survival.
mean.
Yeah.
So it can be different based upon how you're wired, basically, right?
Yeah, and also again,
Yeah.
how lit up your your nervous system
Yeah.
is.
And I think that's the key. Is it's really like determining what survivor mode is. Is really honoring your nervous system in a sense, honoring your body, and like for some people, they need to. It's okay to turn the tears off. It's okay. And for some people, they need to turn them on. They need to go ahead and let them out. And so it's really kind of striking that balance between it's eliminating the tug-of-war basically.
Yeah, that makes me think. I'd be interested in y'all's thoughts. How do you guys feel about people that are like, nah, we're not doing anything, like, forget the holidays, as kind of some sort of avoidance of that merging of grief and gratitude? How would you guys handle that? Because knowing their loved one probably would not want them to just disregard all the holidays. How do you guys feel like you would guide your clients when maybe you kind of knew that it would maybe be good for them to still gather and to have some feelings that they address as a family in that time of gratitude?
I think I'd just be super curious with those people. Like, I was actually reflecting, even right before you said that I remember there was one year where, as a family, we sort of just decided based on our energy levels and a recent loss that we were gonna, kind of just break into, we're kind of on our own for this particular holiday because the person who's normally in charge of it was just, their grief was too extreme. And I remember thinking that I was really proud of that person for setting that boundary. Like, for them saying, I think I'm too spent this year to do X, Y, and Z for Christmas this year. And I felt like it set such a good precedent for me not to use my desire to make other people happy versus learning how to listen to my innate wisdom. And so that's why I'd be curious with the person. Is this person listening to their innate wisdom, and is their innate wisdom inside of them saying, you just don't have it. How about you don't have it to do how you normally do? How would you like to make it unique and special for yourself this year, knowing that these are the things you can't do? How do you want to spend that day? So for me, I just start with being curious. Is the quote unquote avoidance an appropriate strategy? And can I honor that desire to avoid, but also still make space for the part of me that may feel guilty or may not have enough planned for that day so that the sadness feelings overwhelm me? I guess I would just say, as a clinician, I would want to make sure they've not made a quick decision, but they've really allowed themselves to process through everything.
Yeah, I think that's it's all about, let's explore this, right? And But I think especially in the, the betrayal trauma work that we do, we talk so much about the firsts,
Yeah.
the first holiday season, and that's going to be the same after loss, right? I mean, betrayal trauma is a specific loss, and I always just say, I don't think we put a lot of stock in the firsts. And so if this year needs to be different, that doesn't, the fear that we'll, oh my gosh, if we never do the holidays the way we used to, we'll never do it again. And I always kind of say, this year gets to be one of those off years. You know how, like, if you take a test and you stayed up all night, it doesn't actually reflect any of your learning material, you're just tired. This is that year. It actually doesn't have to reflect a lot about, oh my gosh, you'll never be happy or joyous or kind, or you get to just decide this year. Let's tune in. Let's be curious. Let's explore. What do you need presently? And a lot of times just opening up that space and taking off the board. Oh my gosh, we always make a ham and we always make cookies on Christmas Eve and we whatever. Like, it's okay. This year gets to be the one thing that we highlight as different, right? And I also think it has another level of acceptance because you're acknowledging the difference rather than trying to pretend it's all the same. So I had a family early in my career that had a loss, and it was their first holiday season, and so they were kind of, we're not, and I don't know, and so finally they decided their rebellion, in a sense, against this was they were going to have Mexican food for Thanksgiving. So it was all, and it was, it was delicious, right? But it was interesting how they teamed up against the societal expectations in a way.
Yeah.
But then really they were keeping in it, right? So it was
a new norm for them.
It was an
Yeah.
embrace, right, of the difference. And I think from a therapeutic perspective too, the idea of trying to be the same when you're very different is so inauthentic, and you will be in survival mode if you're trying to proceed as normal when you're, when your cells have all been reorganized after a loss.
Let me tell you how much a rebel I am. Because when I was going through a difficult time in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm not buckling up anymore. I'm like, I'm just not going to buckle.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah, that's right, baby. I'm like, look at me. I'll pass a cop here. I'm not going to buckle. I'm going to push against this cultural expectation because I was mad. I was angry. I was upset. I was like, I'm tired of doing what everybody wanted me to do or something, and that was as far as I was willing to take it, But to Shannon's question, I'm pretty much in agreement with Carrie on that. About the first, when you lose something like and I know it varies, and the impact varies based upon what it is you've lost, or if it's the trauma of it, the difference in normative and non-normative events. So. Did you lose your mom when she was 90, or did you lose your mom when you were 30? It's really different in terms of how grief looks in those types of events, right? And and I think, but regardless, there's based upon the level of loss, there's a level of uncertainty that you're entering into this world of uncertainty. So. Who knows if what the holiday is going to be like? And for people that don't have the luxury of processing this through with a therapist, because I think to answer your question, I think most of us would spend a lot of time processing that, so that they could make a decision they could feel good about, right? But some people don't have that luxury, and I'm thinking what's the worst that could happen if you're just like, screw it, I'm not doing holidays this year. I think there's information in that though. I think probably. The thing I'd say would be a not so good thing to do is to not evaluate that experience for yourself to determine in moving forward, how do I want to do this? Yeah. Because when you say, screw it, I'm not doing it, you're honoring a feeling there that probably needs to be honored.
Good point.
But at the same time, you don't want that one to always stay in the driver's seat, right? You got to honor the other ones too. That's why it's important to look back and say, do I want to do this the same way on year 2?
Well,
Which isn't
it may
exactly
be saying
easy.
Screw it, but is it really saying screw it, right? Is it really just saying,
It hurts too bad to have this.
I don't want the pain of sitting around having the exact same family experience with one table spot empty.
Yeah.
And so, even if we're honoring it, that's what I tell people about their parts all the time. I'm like, listen to it. I mean, sometimes my kids say they don't want to go to bed. They're still going to go to bed. But maybe I listen to them a little bit, and what they're really saying is, I don't like this pillow, or, can we switch the rooms around? Or I'm a little bit afraid of the dark and maybe we need a night light. So some messages aren't as straightforward as we take them. Just because my kid says they don't want to go to bed and I listen to them and what they're saying is, oh, I get really scared in my room by myself in the dark. Oh, there's some other ways that we can honor that concern. I don't have to, don't put you to bed, but I do want to slow down and listen to what's making you say I don't want to go to bed.
Yeah.
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 I think what this all boils down to, and I think, we pretty much combined the third point about the impact of our experiences on our emotional states, with the cultural expectations, which makes a lot of sense. And so what it all boils down to, though, is our ability to do self-care during the holidays and what that looks like and how it might look different. And what made me think of that, and with what you were saying, Whitney, is that it made me think of like how I've defined self-care, because it's kind of been a buzzword in our culture, right? And I'm like, it's kind of one of those things. You're like, well, what is it? And so I spent some time thinking about it, and the conclusion I came to is that all self-care is someone's ability to make regular use of one word: no.
It's all about the boundaries,
Right.
right?
Right, and it's not because when you're saying no to if I'm saying no to you, I'm saying yes to me. And so it's really also about saying yes, but it's just where that yes is directed. Most of the time, we're not saying. I'm not looking in the mirror going, yes, Josh, I'm going to do this. But I can look at you and say, no, I'm not going to do that. So I am probably using the word no more often because I'm saying yes to me today.
And I wanted to definitely highlight that the no is so important because, and for me, these past few years, I never put these two together. I would have never thought about these together. And Jen Hatmaker mentioned this in a post last night too. I needed to say no because I needed reduced stimulation. So for me, pairing grief with stimulation in a loud world or a loud environment made my grief feel 10 times thicker. I don't know what it is, but the way I have been able to honor my grief from losing my dad these past few years is I have made an intentional way of saying no and reducing stimulation. And I have made my house and my space an absolute, as peaceful as I can get it. And I have never not watched so much TV in my whole life as when I've been grieving, because just the TV being on. My friend said the other day, I thought you watched the news every day. But it really changed for me. And so reduced stimulation, saying no, lack of noise, allows the things you need to feel and the things you need to face to be there with you. And it is just so important.
Yeah, I love that.
Boy, what a
That's
great way to
awesome.
talk about your emotional
Yeah.
state.
And I was just thinking, think about in a larger system. So I'm learning how to pay attention to my own needs, my own stimulation around grief in the holidays, but my cousins or my aunt or my whomever
Right.
wishes in a totally different manner. For them, excess stimuli is the way to deal with their grief. And so what an interesting
They
dynamic.
want the noise.
Right.
They
That's
want the
their
noise.
way of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? That's their way of managing their experience with grief.
And to me, that was my way of avoiding. If I jumped into a lot of excess socialization and things, that would be the surest way that I wouldn't be in tune to myself. But everybody's going to be on a spectrum of
That's
what
right.
they can handle.
That's right.
Well,
and
sure.
how they are coping or managing with their feelings. And so holidays, I think, are a unique, especially those firsts, right?
Yeah.
What if Aunt Susie is saying, well, we're going to do it like this, and Aunt Sally's like, well, that's not really honoring
Right.
my system.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I think that's why we know that flexibility is important, and that's kind of why we're talking about this today. So how can people manage and still be part of a system, right? And so sometimes that means that if you're in a family, there's going to be somebody that's managing their grief by having less stimulation and somebody that manages their grief by having extra. And you got to all put them together, right?
And we gotta just learn how to stay out of judgment, you know?
That's-
What
that's
a
it,
what a
right.
difficult task for the entire world to take on is to learn how to
Right.
stay out of, hey, I can do it the way I
That's
need
right.
to do it, and this is what's helpful for me,
Right.
and you can do it the way you wanna do it, and you do your way and I'll do mine.
That's right. That's right. And if my mother-in-law needs to make enough food to feed me for 3 weeks, that can work, right? And if I need to leave early because I'm all out of nicing and taking in data that I didn't ask to take in because I can't help but not take it in,
Yeah.
then that can all work too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, I think I mean, we're probably going to have to wrap up on that point. And I know there's so much more to talk about, which is why we have a part two coming up. I hope you guys will join us for part two. The part
I
two
think we'll be able to
discussion.
make it.
Whitney's cousins better be there.
Right.
We're counting on it.
But for anybody who's watching or listening to this, we do have a part two coming up where we're going to talk about going from conflict to connection and talk about the healing relationships over the holidays. Boy, isn't that a task. We appreciate everybody who's tuned in for this part. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the links that we provide. As well, if you're watching this on YouTube, the links might not be in there right now, but they will be. So check out the description of the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And we will be back for part two. So thanks for joining us.